Hey guys, welcome back to more Reddit ProRevenge stories. In this video, I bought an abandoned farm, came back to Renovate and found Karen's family living inside. Let's dive right into the story. So a little background, I work in IT and have been doing pretty well for myself over the past decade. My wife and I always dreamed of getting out of the suburbs and buying some land. Nothing crazy, just enough space to breathe and maybe raise some chickens, grow some vegetables and so on. The whole homestead fantasy that everyone seems to have these days. We'd been saving up and casually browsing rural properties for about 3 years when the opportunity of a lifetime dropped into my lap. A co-worker of mine mentioned that his county was having a tax auction and there was an old farm on the list, 47 acres, with a farmhouse, a barn and a couple of outbuildings. The previous owner had passed away years ago with no heirs and nobody had paid property taxes on the place in over 6 years. The starting bid was insanely low. I did my homework, drove out there multiple times to scope out the property from the road, and the place was overgrown beyond belief. We are talking grass up to your waist, fencing falling apart, trees growing through collapsed sections of the barn roof. The farmhouse still had all its windows intact, which was a good sign, but the paint was peeling off in sheets and the porch was sagging. There were no utilities connected, no active accounts with the power company, just nothing. By all definitions, this place was abandoned. I had a title search done, but it was clean, no liens, no claims, nothing except the back taxes. I talked to a real estate attorney who specialized in tax sales and she walked me through the whole process. I attended the auction, bid against 2 flippers who dropped out early and walked away with 47 acres and a farmhouse for way less than the price of a new truck. The closing process took a few months because of all the paperwork involved with tax sales, but during that time I drove out to the property twice more just to look at it and dream about what it could become. Both times it was exactly as I'd seen it before, empty, overgrown and abandoned. I took photos each time for my own records because my attorney suggested documenting everything I could. Once I had the deed recorded and in my hand, I started making plans. The farmhouse would need a complete renovation, new roof, new plumbing, new electrical, the works. I got quotes from contractors, applied for the necessary permits with the county, and set a date to start the initial assessment and cleanup. This was gonna be my project, our project, the start of a new chapter. Months after closing, I pulled up the long dirt driveway with a contractor buddy of mine in the passenger seat. We had tools, supplies, we had a whole plan for the weekend, but what we didn't have was any expectation of what we were about to find. There was a maroon minivan parked in front of the house, smoke was coming from the chimney, there were kids' toys scattered across what used to be the front yard, someone had mowed a section of the grass. There were even lawn chairs on the porch. I sat in my truck for a solid minute just staring, trying to process what I was seeing. My buddy asked if maybe I had the wrong property. But I didn't have the wrong property. I had the deed in my truck. I had photos of this exact house, this exact driveway from multiple visits. My heart was pounding. I'd put months of planning into all of this. I'd put our savings into this. And now some random family was apparently living in my house like they owned the place. I got out and walked up to the porch. Before I could even knock, the front door swung open and a woman stepped out, mid-40s, arms crossed, looking at me like I was the one who didn't belong there. "Can I help you?" she said in that tone that really means go away. I told her my name and said I was the owner of this property. I said I had purchased it at a tax auction and I was here to start renovations. She laughed, actually laughed in my face, saying, "Sweetie, this is my house. We've been living here for months. You need to get your little truck off my driveway before I call the sheriff on you for trespassing." I was genuinely speechless. My contractor buddy had gotten out of the truck by this point and was standing behind me, equally confused. I tried to explain again that I had the deed, that I had purchased this property legally, and that it had been abandoned for years. That's when she pulled out a piece of paper and waved it at me. "I got a lease agreement right here, signed by the previous owner. This property was given to my family and we have every right to be here. You got scammed, honey. Whoever sold you this place didn't own it." I asked to see the lease. She showed it to me but wouldn't let me hold it. It was handwritten on notebook paper, the signature at the bottom was completely illegible, and it claimed to grant her family permanent residence at this address in exchange for maintaining the property. There was no date, no witness signature, nothing that would make it completely legal or anything. I told her that document wouldn't hold up anywhere and that the previous owner had been dead for years, but she didn't care. She told me the property had been sitting here, wasted, and that her family had rescued it. She said since I don't even live here, I had no right to kick out a family with children. Her husband came out at this point, a big guy, it looked like he hadn't shaved in a week. 2 kids were peering out from behind the door, maybe 8 and 10 years old. The husband started getting aggressive, stepping closer to me, telling me I needed to leave his property immediately. He said something along the lines of, "My wife already explained this to you. We have papers, this is our home. If you come back here again, I'll consider it harassment and I'll make sure you regret it." The wife chimed in and said, "Do you really want to put a family with young children out on the street? What kind of person does that? We've put work into this place. We cleaned it up, we made it livable. That should count for something." I tried one more time to explain the situation calmly. I told them I was not trying to be a bad guy, but this was legally my property and they needed to understand that. The husband stepped even closer to me. "Listen carefully, we're not going anywhere. We know our rights. You can take us to court if you want, but it'll take you years to get us out and by then we have an established residency. So why don't you just cut your losses and walk away?" That's when I realized this was not just some misunderstanding. These people knew exactly what they were doing. They had planned this, and I knew right then and there that arguing was not gonna get me anywhere. I also knew that if I did anything physical or tried to force them out myself, I would be the one getting arrested. So I took a deep breath and told them I would be back, got in my truck and then left. My buddy was losing his mind on the drive home. He kept saying we should have called the cops right then and there, but I knew better. I knew that if I played this wrong, I could end up in a legal nightmare that would drag on for years. These folks had clearly done their homework on how to squat a property, and they knew exactly what they were doing, so I went home and did my own homework. First call Monday morning was to my real estate attorney. She was as shocked as I was, but immediately got to work. She confirmed that my deed was recorded, clean and legal, there were no other claims on the property and the tax sale had been conducted properly, so I was the rightful owner. Next I called the county recorder's office myself just to triple confirm everything. The clerk pulled up the records and verified that the deed was in my name and that the previous owner had died in the state with no heirs and that the county had taken possession before the tax sale. There was no lease on file, no transfer, nothing. Then I drove to the sheriff's office, not to demand they kick these people out, but to ask some questions. I explained the situation and asked if there had been any calls to that address recently. The deputy I spoke with pulled up the records and told me that yeah, there had been a few calls over the past several months, noise complaints from neighbors, a welfare check requested by someone who thought the property was being burglarized, and one call from the woman herself claiming someone had been trespassing on her property. Her property. The deputy told me that without a court order, they couldn't just remove the occupants. And by the way guys, just to quickly interject here, if some entitled idiots trespassed on your property and then squatted in your house, what would you have done? I gotta say, so far OP is way too calm in all of this. I would have called the cops and tried to kick these stupid people out absolutely immediately, but maybe that's just me. How would you have handled the situation? Let me know in the comments and also let me know where you are watching from today. Also, please don't forget to like the video since that would help me tremendously. Thanks a lot for the support. So anyway, he also said that based on what I was telling him, this didn't look like a legitimate tenancy situation. He suggested I document everything and go through the proper legal channels. That's exactly what I did, but I also did some digging of my own. Over the next week, I became a detective. I took time off work and drove out to the area 3 separate times, always parking down the road and walking to avoid being seen by these squatters. I took photos of everything. Their vehicles, their license plates, the improvements they claim to have made, the state of the property. I documented the times they were home, when they left, just everything, and I also started talking to neighbors. Rural communities are tight-knit and people talk. The first neighbor I spoke with, an older guy who lived about a quarter mile down the road, was more than happy to share what he knew. He told me that the woman had been telling everyone for months that the farm was basically free and that she was gonna claim it through adverse possession. She apparently had done this before at another property in a different county, though he didn't know the details of that one. He said that she had been bragging about how easy it was to just move into abandoned places and make them yours if you knew the right legal tricks. She told my wife that the government basically gives away properties if nobody claims them, he said, shaking his head. She said that she'd been studying up on squatters' rights for years, called herself a homesteading expert. And by the way, guys, I'm not sure if homesteading experts usually squat on other people's properties. That is certainly news to me, but maybe I am misinformed. Anyway, another neighbor, a woman who ran a small horse boarding operation nearby, had even more to share about the situation. Apparently, the squatter wife had approached her about using part of her pasture for her kids' pony club without paying anything. When the horse lady refused, she got an earful about how people in rural communities should support each other and how stingy people like her were ruining the countryside. She's got a real entitlement complex, the horse lady told me, acts like the world owes her everything just because she's got kids. But here's where it got really interesting. He told me that she had been collecting rent from another family. There was a small outbuilding on my property, basically a converted shed with no real utilities, and she had convinced some desperate family to move into it and pay her hundreds of dollars a month. She was acting as their landlord on property she did not even own. I could barely contain myself. This woman was not just squatting, she was running a scam. I got the contact info for the family in the shed from the neighbor. I drove over there the next day and introduced myself as the actual owner of the property, and they were mortified. They had no idea. They thought they were renting from a legitimate landlord. They showed me the text messages where she had claimed to own the property, where she had set the rent amount, and where she had threatened to evict them if they were late on payments. They had receipts for every payment they had made to her over the past 5 months. The husband of the family, a guy who worked construction and was barely making ends meet, looked like he wanted to cry. His wife was pregnant with their 3rd child, and they had moved out of a cramped apartment to get some space and fresh air for the kids, and they thought they had actually found a deal. She seemed so nice at first, the wife told me. She said she understood what it was like to struggle. She said she wanted to help young families get started on the land. We thought we were lucky. Lucky. They had been paying rent to a con artist who didn't own a single square foot of the property, and if I hadn't shown up, they would probably still be paying. But I also asked if they would be willing to share those text messages and receipts with me, and they agreed immediately. Now I had documentation, text messages where she admitted she had no deed, and receipts showing she had collected over $2,000 in rent for property she did not own. Statements from neighbors about her bragging, photos I'd taken of the property before she moved in, proving it was abandoned, and the fake handwritten lease she had waved at me. I brought everything to my attorney, and she was practically rubbing her hands together. We filed for a formal eviction through the court, and we also did something else. We reported the fraudulent lease and the rent collection to the county. We filed a complaint with the sheriff's office documenting the forgery and fraud, and we prepared a lawsuit for damages. The court date took a while. These people had been occupying my property for months, and the court apparently took a dim view of squatters who forged documents. She showed up to court dressed like she was going to go to church, acting confident and entitled. Her husband was there too, wearing what looked like his only shirt, fidgeting nervously. She told the judges that the farm had always been theirs and that the tax sale was invalid because she had a lease agreement. She presented her handwritten notebook paper as evidence. She actually had the audacity to give a little speech about how the legal system was designed to protect hardworking families and how I was just another rich investor trying to steal homes from real people. She talked about her children's school, their involvement in the community, and how they had made this house a home. And she even started to tear up at one point. The judge listened politely, then he asked to see my documentation. He looked at her handwritten lease for about 10 seconds, then looked at my recorded deed, my tax sale documents, my photos of the abandoned property, my affidavit from the county recorder, and the text messages where she admitted she had no real documentation. His expression didn't change much, but I could see him doing the math. The whole thing took about maybe 15 minutes. The judge declared them unauthorized occupants with no legal claim to the property. He ordered them to vacate within 14 days. And he made a point of stating on the record that the forged lease agreement could constitute criminal fraud, and he was referring the matter to the district attorney. She tried to argue. She tried to claim that her children would be homeless. The judge told her that was not his concern and that she should have thought about that before moving into someone else's property, but I was not done. Remember the family she had been renting the shed to? I helped them file a small claims case against her to recover the rent they had paid, several thousands of dollars. The case was straightforward since they had receipts and text messages, and she had absolutely no defense. She couldn't claim that she owned the property because she had already lost that argument in front of a judge. The small claims court awarded the full amount plus court costs, and meanwhile, the district attorney's office took an interest in this forgery situation because it turns out forging a lease agreement and using it to collect rent is pretty serious. She was charged with forgery and fraud. I don't know all the details of the criminal case because I wasn't directly involved, but I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she took a plea deal, got a hefty fine, community service, and probation. The eviction deadline came and went. She tried to drag her feet, but the sheriff showed up on day 15 and supervised the removal. I wasn't there for it, but one of the neighbors told me that she was screaming about her rights the entire time. Her husband looked like he wanted to disappear. The kids were crying. It was not pretty, but honestly, I didn't feel bad. The neighbor said the wife kept yelling that this was not over, that she was gonna sue me, and that I had ruined her children's lives. She apparently called me every name in the book and had to be warned twice by the deputies to calm down or else she would be arrested on the spot. Her husband just loaded boxes into their minivan without saying a word. I kind of felt sorry for him. He had hitched his wagon to a con artist and now he was paying for it too. These people had deliberately targeted what they thought was an easy mark. They forged documents and they collected rent fraudulently. They even threatened me on my own property and they tried to steal my dream. After they were gone, I finally got to start my project. The farmhouse was in worse shape than I'd expected because they'd been living there for months without proper utilities. They'd been using a wood stove for heat and apparently just dumping waste in a pit behind the barn. The cleanup took weeks, but we got it done. My wife and I spent every weekend out there for months. We hired contractors for the big stuff and did what we could ourselves. New roof, new plumbing, new electrical. We even insulated the walls, refinished the floors and replaced the windows. We fixed up the barn enough to be functional and torn down the shed where she had been illegally renting to that poor family. The older guy who had given me the initial information came by with his tractor and helped clear some of the overgrown fields. Another neighbor brought over lumber from a barn he was taking down. The first spring after we moved in, 3 different families showed up to help with planting. We are fully living there now. Edit: since some people were asking, yes, the family from the shed got their money back. The judgment was enforceable because she had assets that could be garnished. It took a while, but they recovered almost everything, and they actually stopped by the farm last fall to thank me and see how the place turned out. Good people who got taken advantage of by a con artist. I'm glad they got some justice too. Edit number 2, for those asking about adverse possession, it doesn't work the way she thought it did. In my state, you need continuous occupation for at least 7 years, and you have to meet a bunch of other requirements like paying taxes and making improvements. You cannot just move into a place and claim it after a few months. She was either lying to herself or lying to everyone else, but probably both. And the next one is a story from r/ProRevenge, and it is titled "Neighbor Kept Parking Over the Line." So I'm 34 male and live in a semi-detached house in Edinburgh. My neighbor Duncan is maybe in his mid-50s. We share a driveway, there's a line down the middle, his side and my side pretty straightforward, except Duncan apparently cannot see lines. Since he moved in about 2 years ago, he's been parking maybe 30 to 40 centimeters over onto my side. Doesn't sound like much, but my car is not small and it means I have to do this awkward angle thing to get in and out of my own driveway. Nearly scraped my wing mirror probably 10 times. I asked him nicely about it 3 times already. "Hey Duncan, would you mind parking a bit more to your side? It's a tight squeeze for me." Each time he would say, "Aye, sure, no problem," and then change nothing. I left a note, a polite one. "Hi neighbor, just a reminder about the parking line. Thanks." Nothing. I even showed him one day, walked out when he was getting home, pointed at the line, pointed at his tires clearly over it, and he said, "Oh, it's barely anything, you've got plenty of room," and walked inside. Fine, Duncan. Fine. So here's the thing, I have 2 cars, my main car that I use for work and this old 2003 Vauxhall Corsa that technically runs but I mostly keep for emergencies because I'm too lazy to sell it. It is taxed and insured, completely legal to be on the road. I started parking the Corsa on my side of the driveway, right up against a line, perfectly, precisely on my side, not a centimeter over, but right there. And let me tell you, Duncan's BMW is big. With my Corsa exactly on the line and his car in its usual spot slightly over, he now has approximately 0 room to maneuver. The worst morning I watched from my window as he tried to reverse out. It took him 15 turns. Back and forth, getting redder in the face each time. I had my coffee. It was glorious. He came over that evening. "Your car's in the way." I said, "No, it's not. It's exactly on my side. Check the line." He couldn't argue because I'm right. I'm completely within my rights. He's the one who's been over the line for 2 years. It's been 3 weeks now. He does the 15-point turn every single day. Sometimes I work from home. I'm a sound designer, so I can do a lot remotely, and I'll just happen to be by the window with my tea watching him struggle. He started glaring at me when we crossed paths. Hasn't said a word though, because I mean, what can he say? "Please move your car. That's completely illegally parked so I can continue parking over the line." My wife thinks I'm being childish. She's probably right, but I don't care. Should have stayed on your side, Duncan. And the next one is a fantastic petty revenge story, which is titled, "My friend kept spoiling every show for me, so I spoiled one that didn't exist." So for context, I got this friend Mark, who's a human Twitter notification. If a new episode drops at 3 AM, by 3:05 he's in a group chat like, "Oh my god, when X dies in the first scene," and then follows it with, "LOL, sorry bro, should have watched it earlier." I muted him, asked him nicely, even tried watching stuff earlier, but I got a job and a life. But Mark apparently doesn't. A couple months ago, everyone in our friend group got obsessed with this new sci-fi show, and I was actually keeping up for once. Of course, Mark still managed to text me mid-commute with, "Wait till you see episode 5. I snapped a little and decided, okay, game on. I found out he hadn't started it yet because he was saving it to binge, so I went on Reddit, saw some theories, and then made up my own completely fake plot. Main character, secretly a clone, love interest betrays him, the dog is an alien spy, whole thing set inside the simulation and so on. I dropped this massive wall of spoilers in the chat like, cannot believe they revealed this all in episode 3, haha. Mark lost it and rage-typed about how I ruined it for him, how he was gonna delete the app, blah blah blah. A couple weeks later he finally binge-watched it anyway and realized none of what I said happens at all. He came back with a half-hearted, "You're such a jerk." But he hasn't spoiled a single thing since, and now if he starts to type too much about a show, someone just says, "Careful, might be a clone dog situation," and he shuts up pretty quick. And yeah guys, thank you for watching, please don't forget to like the video, and I will see you again tomorrow.